Hi, my name's Atasia, and this is my course project for Education 1306. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So my class project covers Principles of Agriculture, grades 9 through 12. So students in my class will complete a 4-slide minimum presentation using Google Slides or Prezi about a career in the agriculture industry that they may consider pursuing. Students will be required to do research about this topic and provide a list of sources at the end of their presentation. So like a slide on the end of their thing, they're just going to have to go ahead and put all their sources on there. So students will be graded on 4 components. Research and content are kind of together, so I messed up putting them separately, but just so you know, research and content are together. So how thoroughly did that student gather research? Did they use credible sources? Does this occupation require an OSHA certification? Are the slides clear and concise? Are they organized, easy to anticipate what's coming next? And are there pictures and videos? And then we have preparedness. So is it clear that the slides were made beforehand? Was it obvious that it was put together last minute, etc.? Then we have grammar and spelling. So did the student use appropriate academic language? Are there major spelling errors? Is there correct punctuation? Things like that. And then we have your presentation. So overall, was it a good presentation? Did the students engage with the class? Did they speak loud and clear? And was the classroom actually giving their full attention to that speaker? Did they capture the attention of the class? So then we have my TEKS. So my TEKS are Principles of Ag, grades 9 through 12. So it's under the knowledge and skills category. The students demonstrate professional standards, employability skills as required by businesses and industries. The student is expected to identify career development, education, and entrepreneurship opportunities in the field of ag. So this again falls into that research category. This is what they're going to be looking up. What are the standards? What's the process that you need to take to get to your career, etc. Then we have applied competencies related to your resources, information, interpersonal skills, problem solving, etc. in agriculture, food, and natural resources. So again, this kind of ties back into A. It just kind of gives you that like general research idea, figuring out what is necessary, what skills you need to possess to have a successful career in the ag industry. And then we have demonstrate knowledge of personal and occupational safety. So this is where OSHA comes into play. If you're an oil field worker or a welder, you do need to have OSHA certification. So things like this are important to add into that project to say, hey, I really do need this certification. Then we have analyze employer expectations such as appropriate work habits, ethical conduct, and legal responsibilities. So hypothetically, if somebody pursued a career as a vet, they would need to know the difference between like their ethical and moral standpoints, things like that in that career. And then we have lastly, identify careers in ag, food, and natural resources. So again, finding that career, seeing what works best for you. So then I have my Iste Standards. So the 7 standards that correlate to my assignment are learner. So students will learn how to navigate Google Slides. Leader, students will be given the opportunity to conversate with other students to share ideas, sources, anything else to ensure that they are maximizing their opportunity for success. Then we have citizen, students will be an active listener and engage in presentation etiquette. Then I have collaborator, so I will communicate with other ag teachers, anybody in the science department, to ensure that I am providing the correct information to my students to give them the biggest advantage for this project. Then for designer, using the Death by PowerPoint guidelines, I will ensure that I am presenting the material in the easiest way possible for them to understand, but also make it easier for them to give that eye appeal to inspire their projects off of. So looking at my examples of Death by PowerPoint, they could incorporate that into their slides. So then as facilitator, I will give students examples on how to work Google Slides and ensure that they understand before sending them off. The last thing I would want to do is throw my kids out there and they don't even know what they're doing. They don't know how to work Google Slides. So I want to make sure that they really understand what they're expected to do. And then at analyst, I will allow for students with different learning styles a chance to complete this project in a way that suits their needs the best. So next we have my differentiated learning. Students that have different learning styles should be accommodated to, not to two children don't learn the same. So it's my job as an educator to ensure that they are getting the best options for their learning abilities. So students with special needs could make their presentations specifically pictures. They could have more one-on-one attention with me or another instructor to ensure that they understand what's expected of them, and so on and so forth. And then we could also like provide a list of occupations for them to choose from. That way they're not just kind of like out there grasping at straws. And then, so if we have a student that speaks a foreign language, we could have a translator help them present their projects. We could also ensure that they are competent in using Google Translate. And we could also give them the option to do that presentation one-on-one with the instructor, me, or another person. And then if we had students in the Gifted and Talented program, we could allow them the opportunity to continue on with the assignment that I initially gave, or I could create them an alternative assignment that challenges them just a little bit more intellectually to make it best for them. So then, assessing student mastery. So my students will demonstrate their understanding of each presentation by answering 2 questions pertaining to the different careers. So hypothetically, if we did 6 presentations in one day, each person who presented would add 2 questions in their presentation overall and ask the students at the end of their presentation, and they'll just write those answers on a piece of paper, keep track of all the ones for the day, and turn that in at the end of class as an exit ticket. This just assures me that they are using presentation etiquette, they are paying attention, and they're actually learning something from these presentations. So then my higher order of thinking, my assignment falls pretty heavily underneath the SAMR model. So students will utilize substitution in this model because technology replaces traditional paper projects. They can still use their resources in a library, but they can also use them online if it works better for them. It literally is just replacing a traditional assignment, although it does offer more opportunities to gather information. And then in Bloom's taxonomy, this would fall under the analyzing category because this tests the student's knowledge about a potential career. So they've been spending all this time accumulating all this information, and then they have to lay it out in front of the whole class and kind of this kind of shows me that they really do understand what goes into that career. So then for technology, the students in my class will have access to either Chromebooks, iPads, or laptops in the classroom, and if for some reason we don't, we could go to a computer lab, and they will use Google Slides to create their presentations. They could also use Prezi. That was one of the options, but I have noticed that more people tend to lean towards Google Slides. It's a little bit easier, but Prezi is an option. And then my backup plan. So if technology is unavailable, students can continue their projects using resources in the school library for research. Like I had mentioned earlier, there's books on books on books, magazines, articles, people. They could interview people. Hey, do you know somebody who's in ag? Oh yeah, sure I do. You know, kind of go get their information that way. And then as far as like presenting, they could create their projects on trifold boards, they could make flyers, posters, or even do a paper for their presentation. It's just kind of like, it is a backup for technology not being there. Either one is completely okay, and it does offer a good project in my opinion, so I really do think that these would be the best options. And then I did add a picture of my rubric for reference. Let me move this up so you can see it. So the career in agriculture, for research, students have provided more than 3 sources. They provided a slide with sources at the end of their presentation, and students have provided research that directly relates to their careers. For emerging, students have had at least 3 sources. Students have had a slide with their sources, and they had connections to their careers. Nothing crazy, just kind of like baseline. They did what they needed to do, nothing extraordinary. And then for beginning students had at least 1 source with no slide for their sources. Their slides didn't have much connection to their careers. And then for content, for proficient, students had more than 4 slides. Their information was easy to understand and gave excellent insight to their careers. For emerging, students had at least 4 slides. The information was vague, but it did summarize the career. Again, just kind of like what they needed to do, nothing more, nothing less. And then for beginning, students had at least 2 slides and offered little to no information on their career. So for preparedness, for proficient, the students had very informative slides and were very well organized. For emerging, student slides were messy, no set structure, and kind of just like moved around a lot with information. There was no like this, and this. Nothing was like clear and concise. And then for beginning, student slides were extremely unorganized and looked like no effort was put into it. And then finally for presentation, proficient says student was confident in presenting, engaged with the audience, and overall was a pleasant experience. Emerging is student was more reserved but still relayed information properly and offered some audience engagement. And for beginning, student rushed through the presentation, hardly spoke, and pretty much ignored the audience, and it was hard to follow the presentation and stay engaged. So this is my course project for 1306, and thank you for listening.